Hey there, all you girls, boys, and non-binaries. It's your boy Ron Dawson, and you always can tell when there's a particular topic that gets me heated when it's damn near 10:30 at night, and I have to hop on the mic to address some video that I've seen that needs to be addressing right away. Now, as of this recording, the internet is all ablaze of this debate that Jordan Peterson did on Jubilee on their popular series Surrounded, where they have typically one person who holds one point of view or one ideology, surrounded by 20 or 25 people who hold an opposing point of view. It's called Surrounded. And so all this week, everyone's been talking about Jordan Peterson's episode, where it was originally uh, a Christian surrounded by 20 atheists, and then it got changed to Jordan Peterson surrounded by 20 atheists, because Jordan Peterson can't admit that he can't admit that he's actually not a Christian, so he keeps it vague. So they had to change the title. And there's been lots of hot takes on both sides, from believers and non-believers. I've been enjoying it because I can't stand the man. And so I have been gloriously enjoying all the people addressing it. But in the process of listening to both sides of the theological zeitgeist talk about this particular debate, you have Christians saying, you know, using it as an example of how to not engage with atheists, and you have atheists using it as an example just to say and revel in the joy of seeing Jordan Peterson be made an ass of himself. And so I came across this one particular one by Allie Beth Stuckey. Now, she's a conservative evangelical, and but in this particular video, the way she approaches it, I'll give her props. She's very nice, and I think she's intellectually honest for the most part about how certain Christians addressed Jordan Peterson. But they got to talking about one particular topic that is one of my personal soapboxes, which is slavery in the Bible. And if you've seen one of my earlier videos, you probably can understand why. And as a lot of Christians do, let me just play a clip for you. I'm gonna play the clip for you. We're gonna talk about it, and you can understand why this particular clip gets me heated. So, for context, she spends her video is about an hour. I'm not gonna go through it. I'm just gonna take this one slavery one. So, for context, she's addressing one of the atheists who is bringing up the topic of slavery in the Bible to Jordan Peterson, basically explaining or asking Jordan Peterson. And I think it was during the section about morality. And so he was, as many atheists do to people who are theists, who try to hold a Bible, some form of moral framework, the issue of slavery in the Bible. And so this is Allie Beth's response to this atheist question and how she would respond and the argument that she would give. And I think we'll hear her argument and then you'll hear my reply to what she has to say.
I feel like this is just humans editing based on the cultural evolution.
What do you mean by just?
Okay, I liked the last part of Jordan Peterson's answer there, because he is absolutely right. And I'm sorry, but this is not actually a good, sound, interesting argument from Lucas. I think he could have stopped where he said, well, why doesn't the Bible condemn slavery? But then to say that human beings in general have evolved to the point of not liking slavery, that's just not true. That's just not true. I mean, look at the world. This is such a basic talking point from secular progressives. And I find it so interesting how many apparently former fundamentalists, former churchgoers, they claim that they had been in church forever. They transition into these atheists or agnostics, and they come out swinging with the most basic, tired arguments about the Bible and Christianity. I see it on.
I'm laughing because the answers she's about to give are what I would describe are the most tired, basic answers that Christians give. And again, I'm not trying to give hate to Allie Beth. I think she has a lot of beliefs that I personally would find reprehensible. I'm pretty sure she's a traditional homophobic, transphobic, conservative evangelical. But she's nice about it. She's one of the ones that's nice about it. Anywho, she's about to get into her spiel about how essentially Christians saved slavery, or because of Christianity, slavery was ended, and the Bible doesn't really promote slavery, blah, blah, blah. Again, the same tired arguments that I hear from Christians all the time. She's about to get into, and then we're gonna we're gonna respond, or I'm gonna respond.
On social media every single day. Okay, here's what I would say. Not every part, and this is like mostly to Christians, but I'd probably try to explain the Christian position to an atheist like this too. Not every part of the Bible is prescriptive. Some of it is just descriptive.
All right. So let's get into it. Okay. So first of all, whenever I hear this, the Bible is some parts of the Bible are prescriptive, not descriptive, or descriptive, not prescriptive. Essentially, she's saying there are parts of the Bible that are just telling you how the world was at the time. And there's some parts of the Bible that tell you how you should live. The parts of the Bible that are related to slavery are prescriptive parts of the Bible. They are literally laws that God tells the Israelites. Yes, she says here, and how to treat slaves. But here's the thing that gets me when Christians make this argument. God made it a point to set his people apart from Israel. God made it a point to set his people Israel apart from all the surrounding lands. So much so that he had over 600 laws that they had to follow. Some of those laws included what they could and could not wear. Some of those laws included how they could and could not wear their hair. Some of those laws included what they could and could not eat. He was so concerned about setting his people apart, he had these kind of laws down to what you could eat. And there were other people in the area eating fish at the time. So when you ever hear this excuse, well, God let slavery happen because everybody was doing slavery and he couldn't just take it away. Well, everyone who lived on coastal cities were also eating fish and shellfish. They were also wearing certain fabrics. God said, don't do those things. So that's a piss poor excuse for one. So you have prescriptive laws on what not to eat, what not to wear, but the all good, all powerful God in the Bible, who is supposed to be unchanging, couldn't tell you not to own slaves. He couldn't say, while you're not eating fish, oh yeah, also don't own slaves. I don't buy it. It's a horrible excuse.
It's true that the Old Testament law did not ban outright the owning of slaves, but we see in Deuteronomy 24 and elsewhere in the Old Testament that slavery was to be the last resort for someone who could not provide for his family. It was.
Whenever I hear this, can you picture it? The God of the universe is saying, I'm sorry, you can own slaves because I realize there's just nothing else you can do. You have to own the slaves. Like, yeah, I know I'm the God of the universe, and I said you can't eat all these things, you can't wear all these things. I understand you absolutely just have to own slaves during this. It's just patently ridiculous. Anyway, let's continue.
That is, God gives very clear specifications for how slaves were to be treated. They had rights as image bearers of God. They had protections under the law. They were not to be treated as objects or as property. God is categorically, we see throughout Scripture, against oppression. The kind of
That's the part I want to get to. Now, let's look at some of these verses. So remember what she said there. They were not to be treated, they had laws, they had rights. They were not to be treated as property. She said this. Those are her words. You heard it here, folks. She said it. And she also said something about the Bible's against oppression. Like, is she serious? So much of the Bible is literally about God ordering the oppression of others. Anyway, don't get me off on another tangent. Let's get to this particular point about the verse. So she talked about Deuteronomy, she talked about Exodus. I also find it interesting. They always like to leave out Leviticus. We're going to get to Leviticus too. So now let's look at some of these verses that I think she's referring to. She didn't mention anything in specific, but I'm pretty sure based on the books that she referenced, which chapters she's talking about. Okay, so she mentioned Deuteronomy 24. My guess is if she's talking about Deuteronomy 24, she's talking about verse 7. If someone is caught kidnapping a fellow Israelite, or treating or selling them as a slave, the kidnapper must die. You must purge the evil from among you. So this is a bunch of different laws. This is the only one that's really related to slavery. This is one of the verses that Christians will usually point to say, see, God's against slavery. First of all, this law is specifically about how you treat other fellow Israelites. It has nothing to do with how you treat other people who aren't Israelites, the surrounding countries around you. I wonder what God says about how you treat the surrounding countries around you. We'll get to that when we get to the verse she didn't mention Leviticus 25. But the other one she mentioned was Exodus. She mentioned Exodus. And I like to show the full chapter so you can see that nothing's really taken out of context. So we're gonna hone in. This is Exodus 21:20. Anyone who beats their male or female slave with a rod must be punished if the slave dies as a direct result, but they are not to be punished if the slave recovers after a day or two. Why? Why? Since the slave is their property. She literally just said that they were not supposed to be treated as property. Literally, it says that they're property. Now, she likes to use the ESV. I will give her this. In the ESV, which is one of the favorite ones that evangelical Christians like to use, it doesn't say property, it says money. But in most translations, it says property. Either way, whether it uses the actual word property, the idea that it is conveying is you can beat them. These laws that God passed to take care of slaves said you can beat them as long as they don't die. Why? Because they are your property. But that's not the only verse that references slaves as property. I mentioned earlier, that one in Deuteronomy was about how not to treat your fellow Israelite. Let's look at what God says about how you can treat people who aren't necessarily fellow Israelites. Leviticus 25. Let's just do the whole chapter. We won't read the whole chapter, but we're going to zero in on chapter 25, verses 44 through 46. Two of my favorite verses in the Bible. Whenever any Christian talks about how the Bible is against slavery, they always conveniently skip over this verse in this chapter. Leviticus 25, 44, 46. Your male and female slaves are to come from the nations around you, and from them you may buy slaves. You may also buy some of the temporary residents living among you, meaning you can even buy the people who aren't Israelites living among you. You can even buy them. Members of their clans born in your country, and they will become your what? Your what? Your property. You can bequeath them to your children as inherited what? Property, and can make them slaves for life. But you must not rule over your fellow Israelites ruthlessly. Again, here it is saying again how not to treat your fellow Israelites. And if you go to, before that, verses 39 through 43, again, are telling how not to treat your fellow Israelites as property. Now, another thing that I always find interesting when Christians bring up slavery in the Bible, and they say how God gave rules on how to treat your slaves. Like slavery was all around this part of the world, and God actually had laws to make sure you treat your slaves well. Well, first we saw that God said it's okay if you beat them as long as they don't die. That's not the greatest, but this wasn't new. Okay. I have saved here the Code of Hammurabi. The Code of Hammurabi was a king. He was like the sixth king of Babylon. So a lot of what you see in Exodus and Deuteronomy are literally just plagiarized versions of the Code of Hammurabi. So the Code of Hammurabi has here, if a man incurs debt and cannot repay it, he may sell himself, his wife, his son, and his daughter into servitude, or they may be given away for forced labor to settle the debt. This is indentured servitude. Now, look at this. These individuals would serve in the house of the person who purchased them, to whom they were given as a debt servitude for a period of 3 years. In the fourth year, they were set free. In the Code of Hammurabi, if you're an indentured servant, 3 years, year number 4, you let go. You know how long you get to be an indentured servant in the Old Testament? 6 years. They don't have to let you go. The year of Jubilee was until the 7th year. So not only, and the law of Hammurabi predates when Exodus and Deuteronomy were written by 300 years. So not only did the Code of Hammurabi exist before these Old Testament books were written, but you get a better deal in Babylon than you did among the Israelites. So again, this idea that God created these laws for a land where everybody was just doing it, God had no choice. He had to let them do it. his rules weren't even as good as the ones that already existed. And and this is what's frustrating, talking to Christians about slavery in the Bible. But she goes on. Again, she seems like a nice enough woman, aside from the homophobia and the transphobia, at least in this video. But again, let's get back to what she's talking about. The argument that she would give with regards to how to answer this question about slavery in the Bible. So we already know either I want to assume the best of her. Like I'm not going to say outright that she's lying, because at the beginning of this video, she even said that she's not like a biblical expert, but she knows her Bible. So at worst, she's lying by not mentioning any of this stuff. At best, if I were to give her the benefit of the doubt, she just doesn't know. She doesn't know that the Bible literally says your slaves are your property, when she's telling you that the Bible is saying that you're not to treat your slaves as property. It's literally the exact opposite of what the Bible actually says. Okay, but now let's finish her whole thing about how Christians save the world.
And it is so often atheists and progressives who say that, well, we Americans, we're just so blinded by our Western lens and we just need to open our eyes to the way that other countries do things. Well, Africa still has slavery. China still has slavery. Africa sold slaves to Americans hundreds of years ago, and they still sell and use slaves to this day. China.
Newsflash, from a certain point of view, America still has slavery. It's called the prison institutional complex. So look at the documentary 13th by Ava DuVernay if you want to know the 401. But basically, anyone who's serving in prison can still be a slave for all intents and purposes. And so we still have a form of slavery. It's not obviously like it was back then, but there is still a form of slavery even here in America. So, but now she's going to go on and talk about how Christianity was the one. I think it's the next part where she talks about because of Christianity that slavery ended.
The people, the followers of the way, Christians, little Christ, change how the world saw children, changed how the world defined right and wrong, changed how the world defined justice, introduced the world to the concept of human rights that didn't just.
So basically, she's making the argument that before Christians came into existence 2,000 years ago, there was no concept of justice. There was no concept of right and wrong. All those Greek philosophers, Socrates, Plato, all the things they talked about with regards to morality, that didn't exist or it didn't count. Like, I don't know how she counts that, but somehow the concept of justice and right and wrong was born 2,000 years ago in Israel, in Palestine, by followers of the way. That's essentially the argument that she's making. Now, I'm not going to say that Christians didn't play a role in changing and having influence on the morality and Western civilization. They absolutely did. That's not my argument. But to say that we got here strictly because of Christianity and that there were no other, like there are other forms of philosophy that have an impact on Western civilization other than Christianity. And to act like Christianity is the only thing that got us to where we are, especially when you look at when you had all these Christians doing good things, you also had a bunch of Christians doing some horrible ish, like the Inquisition, the Crusades, slavery. I mean, she's going to go on talking about how slavery was ended because of Christianity. The same people, during the same time that you had Christians fighting against slavery, you also had Christians fighting for slavery. As I say in my another video when I was responding to one of these, I think it was a Black apologist, the largest Protestant denomination in the United States, the Southern Baptist Convention, was started because, like I always say, they wanted to keep them some slaves. It was started because of the issue of slavery. So yes, you had Christians fighting on the side of right, and you had Christians fighting for slavery. So that tells me that there's something more transcendent outside of just the idea of Christianity that has led people to end Christianity, at least here in the West, and to make this argument that Christianity is what saved us. Like I always like to say this too. 100 years from now, heaven, if there's a God willing, if there's a God, that God willing, and there's no more hatred and bigotry towards those in the LGBTQ community, you're going to have Christians saying how it was Christians that got us there. I guarantee you, however long it takes for us to get to that point, you're going to have Christians saying it was Christians who stopped the bigotry against the LGBTQ community. And they're going to point to all the progressive Christians that now someone like her would call a heretic. She would probably call someone like that a heretic, these quote unquote progressive secularists. And it's the same thing with slavery. If you were to go back to the late 1800s, you would see a bunch of Christians using every argument from the Bible to say why slavery was a good thing. So it's so frustrating and so annoying when I hear these Christians use these arguments and act as if, like she says, atheists have all these tired arguments. Her arguments are the tired ones. This, referencing Deuteronomy and Exodus because God made rules about how to treat slaves, ignoring the fact that one of those rules is that you can beat them so long as they don't die, saying that you aren't to treat them like property when you had verses specifically saying you can beat them because they are your property. I mean, it's just, again, either she's ignorant of this part of the Bible or she's lying. It's one of the two. None of them are a good look. Anyway, let me know what you think. If you're seeing this video, that means the video you were watching has come to an end. But it doesn't mean our time together has to end. Do all the YouTubey things. Like, love, share, engage, leave a comment. And you don't have to go away. There are other videos on this channel. Check them out. I'm a new and growing channel. Show a brother some love.